Alright, you bastards, this is Some-Belgian-prepper, and today we're going to talk about a lot of things you can use a smartphone with in survival situations. But before we do that, if you're interested in detective stories, this is the first part of 11-part series that I wrote. It's called Bloody Crosses, it's in Dutch. If you're interested into detective series, look down in the description, there will be a link. So, survival with a smartphone. Smartphones can be useful even when the battery is dead. So I've made a whole list about things that you possibly can do with smartphones. You will see that this is empty. Why? Because it's hard to film this while you're holding it in your hand. So that is just a case just to show you what you certain things that you can do. And let's start with because there are several things that are obviously that you can do, but I will first talk about the more improvised ways, like with a dead phone that you can where the batteries are down, that you can use a smartphone for. So in case you're stranded, bug out situation, or you're the only survivor of a plane fall, I don't know. You can use a phone for several things. First of all, yeah, of course you can call for help, but if the battery is dead, there are still several things you can do with even a broken phone, and that is start a fire. So yeah, start a fire. How can you start a fire with a phone? Well, it's especially with the batteries that you usually it's a lithium batteries, and I've talked about this in several videos on how to make fire with a cell phone battery. There are several ways you can take the battery and you can connect the plus and the min pole with some metal wire, put it onto Kindle, make some shortcut. How do you say this? Shortcut where the electricity will start to get heated, and that way you can use the heat from that to start a fire. Another thing you can do is perforate perforate the lithium battery, but be careful because the battery can explode. But when the inside of a lithium battery is exposed to oxygen, then it will start to get a chemical reaction and will start to burn. You can only do this one time, so be very carefully that you do not wound yourself with burning wounds or your eyes. And yeah, make sure that the fire is starting the fire, that it's worth it. Another thing that you can do is pour water on it, and it will also give a chemical reaction. And yeah, you have to be very quick and be very carefully not to wound yourself, and also that whatever you're trying to put on fire does not get wet and will die out. But yeah, it's lithium battery, so that can even burn with even moisture and water. So that's something you can do. Another thing you can do is if you these days smartphones are very flat because of their touchscreen. So if somebody has a collapsed lung or a perforated chest, like with a sucking wound, then you have to make a chest seal. So I would say, of course, it's better to call for help first. But if there is somebody else with a smartphone, you can take the flat side of the phone and put it onto the sucking wound of the chest, put it on and keep it on, and that will create a certain a seal that will not pull vacuum anymore. So that way you can close off a chest sucking chest wound till professional help will arrive. Another thing is cutting pieces. Well, the a cell phone is made out of several pieces of metal and glass shards from the screen and other plastic parts, and those parts you can and use as a cutting device in a survival situation. So imagine you have the glass, piece of plastic, perhaps some metal from the inside, and you try to sharpen it, the edges of it, onto a rock or with sand, and that way you have a sort of cutting. You can make an improvised cutting device or a knife with that, and yeah, that could be very helpful in a survival situation where you need to cut something. Another thing is you can make a compass. Like I said, there are metal parts inside of the the smartphone, so you can take those metal parts and you can make an improvised compass with it. You can do this by if you have a flat still water and you put a leaf on it, and on the leaf you first you take the piece of metal, and one side of the metal you start to rub on your clothes so it will start to magnetize. You put it on the leaf and it will start, the magnetized part will start to turn to the north, and that way you can have an improvised compass that I made a video about this on how to navigate. I would say look it up. Yeah, so those are things that you can do in a survival situation, a la Bear Grylls style, I guess, or whatever survival guy is now trending. Yeah. So, but it can also be used in everyday life or in more bad disaster scenarios. Cell phone can be very useful. I have made a list about these things, and we will talk about it one by one. It will not be in a certain order, so yeah, it can be. I will tell you in what kind of situations you can use them. So, first of all, calculator. Yeah, calculator. Yeah, every cell phone has them, but imagine how important a calculator can be in when you are building something or you need to do some mechanical math to measure how much force are on some things. You need a calculator for that, or when you want to calculate how many days of supplies you have and this and that, or you want to calculate certain measurements when you're making something like chemicals. That way, I would say a calculator can be very important if you want to make things yourself, and when things are down, like you cannot get laptops anymore, or some you have do not have a calculator or no more batteries of that, you can still recharge a cell phone, and that way, yeah, you can use a calculator for those things. Another thing is the camera. The camera could be very useful for especially with the smartphone because they are high definition. You can take pictures of your documents, your passport, your or insurance info, and all every official document that you have. Take a picture of it and put it into a chip or keep it into your smartphone. That way, if you have to go to a bug out or as a refugee, you always have your personal information, even when the papers are getting wet or burned or stolen. You could still have your smartphone with all your personal information and official documents to show you, and that will help with immigration or refugee process very quicker. So that's something you can do, or take pictures of edible plants, and that way you have a visual memory if you are on a bug out and you want to know was this the plant that was edible, and you take a look at the picture with the name of the plant on it. And yeah, that's something that you can do. Another thing, compass. Smartphones usually have some sort of app with a compass on it, so that could be kind of useful for when you're on a bug out and you need to navigate a little bit. Which comes to the next point. You can also take pictures of that. I forgot to tell you to take a picture of maps. So if you have a certain bug out route or bug out location, you take pictures of the map, and when your paper map is wet or ripped or something else, you still have this backup to find your way. Another thing that could be handy is offline maps. So there are maps that you can download, official maps, and you can zoom in, make a route, this or that, and that way you can calculate routes to your bug out location. I would say if you're going to be dependent on a smartphone, have always a certain way to charge it, like a solar panel or a power bank or perhaps one of those dynamo cranks. So that way you will always have your smartphone for that kind of information. Another thing is, that is something that I do not like, but it could be helpful for some people. Crypto. So imagine if you need to flee your country because of war, a big disaster, political problems, or you're being persecuted. That way, you can put your money onto sort of crypto, perhaps, and that way you have a way to pay on an official way in another country without going to change the money, or your perhaps you do not have your bank account card and such anymore. So that way, that's a way that you can use it. I personally do not use it because I do not trust crypto. Another thing is games and music. Yeah, the apocalypse or shit hit the fan situation, or even during a bug out, you could still want to relax. So you can and get a library with all your favorite music. You can play some little games, and it could also be handy when you have, especially when you have small infants during a bug out. It could be very stressful for them, so you can distract their minds with a small game, a simple small game on something like this, and that way, yeah, they can cope a little bit better situation. Or during long waiting periods, like if you have to wait on a bus or an evacuation bus or trains or whatever you have to wait for, or persons that will follow you in the that will follow you to a certain points that you agreed on with during a bug out. Those things you can bridge that time period. Another thing is LED lights. Every smartphone has a LED light, and a good thing about it is those lights can be tuned to bright or low. So to some models. So that could be handy for when your how do you say this, when your flashlight is out of batteries or doesn't work or is broken, and that's kind of a backup that you have, and it's also a little bit conserve. You can conserve some energy with it because it's a LED light. So yeah, those are things that you can do. Um, Another thing is Morse. There are several ways you can use Morse as a signal with a smartphone. One of the things are with a flashlight. You can put a flashlight up and you can use your hand for a short, long, long, short, and that way you can make an SOS signal in Morse code. Another thing is even when the battery is dead. I perhaps forgotten to tell you with the first things. Usually, it's the screen is reflective. So when you start to reflect the light to perhaps a helicopter, a plane, or from a rescue group that is far away, you can try to get their attention like with a signal mirror. So that's also a good thing you can do. And you can make a fire with the ways how to make a fire, like I said, with the dead battery with this. So those are things that you can do. Or perhaps you can use it as a, how do you say this? There are perhaps some music or tunes that you can use, and you can make a noise. So instead of yelling all the time, you can play a sort of signal as loud as possible, and that could be picked up by other people. So another thing is, as a way of signaling, is to say that you were there. So you can, when you have a crash with a plane or something, and you cannot stay at the plane for some reason, and you go into a certain direction, you could leave parts, or perhaps you can carve a certain message into the phone and lay it on a path that you've taken. And when a rescue group search out the area, they can find the phone and they can see from, oh, the plane crashed over there, phone is here, so you must come into that direction. Or you can start to carve a certain message into the how do you say this, into the screen or the side of the this, how do you call this, the case, yeah, the case, so that people will know what direction that you went, what is your situation, where are you going, or how many survivors are there. So yeah, when a rescue group finds something like a smartphone somewhere visible, they will immediately look at it, and that way you can give them a lot of information to search for you and you can get help. Another thing is radio. Yeah, that's also a part of perhaps the entertainment for radio, but it's also handy to get information about the current situation. So when there is a disaster, you can listen to the radio. It's handy when you got one of those ear plugs with the wires to use as a radio antenna, and that way you can get information about where are rescue centers, what is the situation, how far has the disaster gone, going on, and all such, which bridges are collapsed or which tunnels are not usable, or where are checkpoints. Those kind of information you can get by just listening on the local radio. So that's also very handy. Another thing, a recorder. So when you start to lose your mind a little bit, or you want to leave a message to people that you perhaps, if you do not think, yeah, this kind of sounds dark, I know, but if you are in a situation and you think you will not survive, you can record a final message towards your family or friends or something like that, or a message like I said before. When you think there is a rescue group, you can speak in a message, perhaps write your code of your cell phone that they can open it with, say that there is a message, and you can take a very long message and they will find it and can listen to it and perhaps find you or give the final message to your family and friends or something, or your wife and children. Those are all things that could happen, and never say that this could never happen to you, because a lot of people have been in these kind of situations. And then there are things that are also you can use as a storage. So you can store personal information, you can store music, pictures of your family. You can also get how do you say this, offline libraries. So ebooks, information books, manuals, survival manuals first aid manuals. So in a survival situation, you can look information up on how to treat certain wounds or build certain things on a more effective way. So that's something that you also can do. Perhaps a translator like like a translation book, ebook, perhaps, that you, if you're going to another country, and it could be very helpful, especially as a refugee. Another thing that I personally do is, if you have a smartphone, you can store some money in it. So if you have a case like this, you can take a few bills, put them behind. So when you lost your wallet, you got robbed of your wallet or something like that, then you have at least a few money bills, bank. How do you say this? Those paper money that you can put in the case and use that to pay, or when you have not enough on your bank account while paying electronic, you can also put some cards in it: your passport, your identity card, your driver license, or a bank account. So those are all small enough to put into the case of the smartphone. Why? Because people lose their wallets, but people are always on the smartphone, so those are the things that they are less likely to use. So yeah, those are things that you also can do just in daily life to make things more easier, or for small annoyances, perhaps. So is the word. So those are things that you can also do. And yeah, you can also put some of those very thin multi-tool cards. You know, the tiny little cards with razors, or the fishing line, the fishing hooks and all those. You can put them, or those how do you call those, ninja mall cards, I guess is the name. You can are also small enough to put into the case of a smartphone. Be careful that you do not put something, a stick in it, that it will break the screen. So be very carefully with that. And as a last thing, I would say, get a good case. Why? I'm not talking about a case that looks cute or just some small flappy thing. I'm talking about a case to really protect, because it's a very smartphones are really expensive. So the smallest drop can break the screen and it will render it useless. You do not want that in a survival situation. So I would say, get a good case where even a drop could protect it for the most part against the breaking of the screen. And yeah, that could save you a lot of money, especially during financial problems or financial crises. So yeah, you do not want to break those things. And yeah, those are the most things that you can do with a smartphone. Yeah, if you know any other thing that you can do with a smartphone for survival purposes, please let me know in the comments. I'm always eager to learn. Uh, I would say subscribe, like, and all that good stuff. And if you know anything, put it into the comments. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. Cheers.